Hey guys, welcome back out in the garage. Today, what I'm working on, I tore down these small block Chevy heads to check them out to see if there's anything we need to do as far as repair on those. These heads, if you go back about 4 or 5 videos back, these heads belong to that small block Chevy that I showed that's been rebuilt like 30 years ago, but it was never ran. It was a fresh rebuild, but was never installed in anything. Didn't even have oil in it yet. It just sat on an engine stand for all those years. So we tore it down, found a couple little things we had to address, like a piston was real hard to move, and I already fixed that and everything. We haven't put the engine together yet, but we did try to see if there's anything that we need to take care of before we would get to that point. The timing chain, it looked like a new sprocket on top, but I used one on the bottom, what it looked like, and they were very aggressive putting it on. Had big dents in it, okay? Like they hammered it on with a punch, but a bunch in the same spot. But anyway, we'll go back to that when we get back to the rotated assembly and stuff like that. So these are the cylinder heads off of it, and they have a fresh valve job. So before I took them apart, I numbered the valves, the order that they were in, and I stamped the head. I always stamp the side in the front. Let's just say my left side, okay? I always stamp a 1, and this head gets a 2, and then I go 1 through 8, and then I go A through I on the numbering the valves. Okay, I do the alphabet on number 2. Unfortunately, I always use a 0 though for my number 1 stamp, because I lost that number 1 stamp years ago. So I use a 0 and a 2. Now, so I went ahead and tore them down just to kind of give it a visual, and we will be doing some changes, okay? There's a few things I found that I think I'm gonna have to talk to the owner of the engine and see if he wants to make changes or not. We'll find out. What I found is, let's just start easy. We'll start from number 1 here. This is how the springs came off, okay? They're all flat retainer, no rotators, which is fine. This is great, you know what I mean? Because that way you don't have to mess with those rotators. This is good. But it has a single spring, no damper, no oil damper in it, and a progressive on the bottom here, okay? Not a big deal. Then they also had a single spring with a damper. That's an oil damper. If you can see it, there's like a spring. See that flat ring right there? That's a spring. I don't know if you can kind of see it up in there. What that does is, and see how they're wide, how it's real wide, that little thin spring. As the spring collapses, as the spring moves up and down, as the valves opening and closing, that's like a gate or like a door. So oil can get through, let's say, but when this spring starts to collapse, it closes. All those little lines basically almost touch each other. And that way it kind of closes off so oil doesn't go right down the valve guide. Okay, not a bad deal there either, because it's just a stock rebuild. They all had, I call these bells. Have no idea what the professional name is. I never looked it up. But since about 1984, I have named these little guys bells. I just call them bells. Okay, they're an oil deflector also. So how these things work is basically kind of the same thing. They sit on top here of the spring, and then as the spring goes down, the oil's kind of deflected off of here instead of trying to go in, because your valve guide, let's say your valve guide is up in the spring this far. But as this goes down, the thickness, I guess, or the width, or however I word it here, kind of between this up here and this width here, it blocks some of the oil, deflects the oil from going down the valve guide. Okay, so bells are fine. You don't see them on performance stuff, but a lot of stock stuff, you're gonna find these valves. So far everything good. Okay, seals. They put the O-ring seals on. I have no problem with that. I probably installed in the early days hundreds of these, and actually I still use them, but not for that reason. I actually use them to hold valves in, like when I'm doing something on like let's say on my cylinder heads or whatever, and I keep those valves in that, and I want them in there. You can actually slide these O-rings, because a lot of us have packs of these left over from engine kits and everything, and the gasket sets. I just slide them over it, and that's what keeps my valve in the guide, so I can move the head around, or I can even have the head sitting there this way on the machine because I'm messing with spring height or whatever. I put these on. That way I don't have to keep taking the valve out and set it aside and put it back in, and you can see where I'm coming from. So these have their advantage if you hung onto them, if you're a machine guy and you hung onto a bunch of these. But now nobody agrees with these anymore. This is outdated. This is not used. Okay, and the only way you can use these is if you have a double groove. So your valve locks here go on the top groove. This O-ring is gonna go in this groove. So basically let's say it would go on like that, okay? So after you compress the spring and everything, you'll roll that on, and then you'll put, of course, your keeper and your cap and everything up here. So, but what this guy does, because you have, this is why I'm not saying these are junk, because they can still work on stock stuff, rebuilds like this, only because what this seal does is stops the oil, or helps stop the oil from going in between the keepers, okay, or the locks. See, here's your locks. You have two locks. I'm probably not gonna be able to hold them together. Anyway, two locks like that, and that's what holds, the valve in. So basically this seal is sitting right underneath it, so that when the oil tries to go through the top here, it's got a seal right there. So actually, this is not a bad deal if you're running bells, stock height guides, okay, and springs with dampers, okay, with oil dampers. Those seals will work fine. But now we all put anywhere from a positive Viton seal, or a positive seal of some sort, or an umbrella. That we can still do stuff like that. So now that I've talked about all that, and I showed you all that, now here's my little dilemma. This is how they came off. But they put this spring here with the oil damper on the exhaust, okay? They put this spring with no kind of oil damper on the intake. The problem with that, intake always tries to suck, okay? Exhaust is always blowing. So this is my theory, and the way I would do it and the way I've done things. I would put this on the exhaust, because you have less chance of oil going down the stem on an exhaust than you do an intake. That's why in a lot of our engines that we build, even race engines, we don't even put seals. Sometimes we don't put no seals on. And then, or we would leave the exhaust seals off, because they're not as mandatory, depending on your situation, as an intake. The intake's always trying to suck, okay? Because you gotta remember that valve's opening and everything's going in, so any guide movement, any clearance in the guide it's trying to suck that out, so it's going to suck the oil in. So you would actually want to put a damper on a intake, okay, on intake, but they had it the opposite, okay. So that right there, I don't know how it would have worked, but since they had the bales, and you know, because if they would have had an umbrella, now you can run dual spring, triple spring, single springs without damper on engines all day long. But then you're going to want a good seal. You're going to want a nice, good umbrella seal, like a tall one, or an actual positive seal, you know, something that presses on the guide and it stays on, okay? If you're going to run without a damper. So, if that makes any sense, that's that. Now, let me see, there's something else. So, and when you use these O-rings, about, I don't know, 5 of these look like this. And this is something you gotta look for when you do your assembly. I don't know if that'll even show. Let me see. No, it's gonna be blurry in it. How come it won't focus? Anyway, around the top, see where it's smashed up there? That's where it got caught in the keeper, in the lock. Oh, there we go. Maybe if I move it up here. See that big smash? Let me turn it this way. See that? That's where, and there's about 5 of them that way. That's because when they popped the spring back up with the locks, it rolled this, and it got caught under the keeper. So some of these, it was caught in the keeper or in the lock, which may cause a problem later on, that because you know that keeper couldn't have been perfectly sealed as far as doing its job locking that valve in if you had a piece of that rubber underneath it. Like saying there's like, what I first thought it was was just like a puzzle. I thought that was extra rubber, and you know how you can break them apart. But a couple of them that I looked at real close, you can actually see the keeper groove or whatever, you know, on the lock. So that's what that is. That's pinching that. Because even if that was a puzzle pieces like they were stuck together and you just kind of break them apart, you know how they do stuff like that, you wouldn't want that on there. That should have been cut off anyway then, because you know that's going to play, it can mess with you, okay? So, we're changing the cam. It had a stock cam in it, a used one with no numbers, so we don't even know what the cam really was. And so we're gonna go ahead and change that, which will get springs to match that cam. So with that said, we probably want to be using these springs, but we may use the retainers and the bales depending on the spring. Like if we go back with a Z28 spring, we used to call them Z28 springs. A lot of you guys remember those springs. They're very popular, and they still sell them. Well, we can still use that bale and stuff with those, and they can actually handle a little more lift and duration without having to do a bunch of machining in the pockets and a little more spring pressure. And that's another thing. These 2 springs, the single without the damper was actually taller. Okay, I don't know if you can see it. Let me see. But it's taller, all right? And hopefully I'm in there. But I checked them on the spring pressure. The one with the damper was actually 6 to 7 pounds heavier as far as pounds, okay, at the seat, let's just say that, okay? So at the same height. So that damper must give that a little bit, and this spring was actually lighter, even though it's taller, you would think it would have had more pounds on it, okay, at the same stem height or spring height. But this one actually had about, like say, 6 or 7 more, this one did. And these were also progressive. See the bottom, see the springs tighter down here? and I didn't think to look, but as I was popping them off, I don't know if any of them were upside down or not. So anyway, that's something you gotta look for on a single spring also, is if they're, we call them progressive, okay? Down here, see how they're tight coil and loose coil, okay? Now, okay, so that's all the deal on the, and they look like actually new valves, or they did a good job of polishing it all up real good, the stems and stuff. But like these are look like a swirl polished stainless valve. So I'm gonna say they're brand new. So that was why I wanted to number everything, because I was thinking that I want to put them back in the same hole. But I found some other little deals, which I need to probably move this phone over here. Let me see if I can do this without. Just gotta bear with me for a second, because this is where I wish I knew how to do that other stuff, so I didn't have to move all this stuff around so much. Okay, here, valves, here's the exhaust seat. I don't know if you can really see it, but they're pitted. Even though they ground it, see, they ground all this, but they are pitted. Let me see if I can grab my flashlight. Hold on. Let's see if that helps any. Probably not. There you go. See that seat? Focus. Anyway, you can kind of see the pits. Okay. Not so much in the intakes, but in the exhaust. Here you go. Look at that one. See that? That one. So we have a couple of options on that. One is we can machine them out and put hardened seats in for today's fuel. You know, if it's a daily driver, you can do that. I don't do it on my personal stuff so much, but a lot of people swear you need to go hardened seats now because of today's fuel. And there's no lead in it, which is not a bad idea. But if it's just like a weekend deal or whatever, I don't stress it so much. I'd rather just throw a little additive in the fuel, but that's me, okay? Or, like I say, we can go ahead and machine this, knock in seats, or I can just redo the valves and the seats. I can grind all that out, put 3-angle valve job. I can make it still work. I'm not even worried about that. There's a lot of material there. So that's no big deal. So numbering the valves didn't really matter because we're gonna end up changing that. Now, another thing I want to show you. Let me see if I can flip this over without knocking stuff everywhere. Okay, here we go. These are liners. They're not false guides. I wish I would have dug out a false guide. I could have showed you. But these are what they call guide liners or K liners. See that bronze or that brass looking color? See, kind of see it sticking up a little bit right there? Okay, that's how a lot of shops do it, and it's fast. And they don't use a machine to do it. It's all done by hand. It's like a drill first, rims at the size, then you run in the liner with like an air hammer, then you can run your rim. So nowadays they run a ball through it, boom, boom. Okay, I don't do any of that. I refuse to do that since forever, okay? I don't. I like to machine and put false guides in. But a lot of people swear by these, but I've taken so many heads apart that those were stuck to the valve, or they would come out halfway, or I would see it up in the spring up here because it was floating, it was moving. Now, what I want to show, let me see which one it is. On one of these, Okay, you can see it's all the way up, right? So you know it hasn't moved. It's right there. But here's what I don't like in this one. Well, okay, hold on. Bear with me. There. Can you see it hanging out? I think I got the light in the wrong spot. See it hanging out there? Okay, that's gonna cause problems. Like that one there, you don't see it. That one you can kind of see it. Okay, these things are really thin. They're not thick at all. And let's see if I can maybe even show you. Yeah, they're real thin and they have a split in it. So there's a split right there. That's a factory split because they have a split in them and the split supposed to close up as you run that in. Well, that's gonna start shredding on your valve. That would have started rubbing the valve stem as it, over time, going like this. And if that started rolling in or doing anything stupid, it starts tearing up the valves, because I've seen it. The valves would just be ate up. That'd be ate up, it'll catch it, pull it out, and all kinds of stuff's gonna happen. And it's on the exhaust side, so who knows it's not gonna flame up, you know, and get real red, or who knows, and melt, and then stick a guide, and then your piston hits the valve, and then you got the whole thing going on. So then on this head, yeah, you can see that one's hanging out right there. That one is. Yeah, those are flush, kind of. That one's out a little bit. But that's all gonna catch. Those shouldn't be hanging out whatsoever. Okay. So I'm putting guides in, okay? I'm gonna put false guides. Unfortunately, I didn't dig out a false guide so I can show you what it looks like. But basically, I don't think I have one anywhere. Real easy to get through that going into my stock. Okay, I don't. Here we go. A false guide is like, this is an old one. Right there, this is an old guide. And what I do here, this is my headstand. I'll show that in a second. I take an old valve and I square it off. A lot of people do this. Put a flat spot on the old valve, slide an old guide on there, or even rubber hose. Then that way, when you're messing with the head, you can actually go just like that. It holds your head there while you're tearing it down or assembly. It's better than trying to use wood sometimes, the 2x4. Same thing here, see, an old valve, flat spot, but this one actually has a piece of rubber on it. See? And you can just pick whatever hole you want to put it in for whatever height you want. See, that was in a lower head bolt than this one, and that's how they set different. Or I can go ahead and just set it in this one and lay it back even farther. So those are cool to have. Just get you a couple of valves, go on a flat spot, cut you some hose the length you want, and put them on. I actually got 3 or 4 of those. I got a couple over there. So basically that is, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna lower that down a little bit. Hopefully I'm still in the camera. I had to sit down for a second. So hopefully that kind of shows what's going on with the heads. So the heads are gonna definitely have to be some work done to them, okay? So, but the valves, like I said, the valves, the only thing, I didn't find anything wrong at the moment. So the valves are fine. The springs are actually okay, but we just need to switch them if we go with those springs and don't run much more cam. Seals will switch out to either umbrellas or positives. Guides for sure. I'm running all that. I can't just remove those and run the stock guides. I have to change the whole guide now because they drill those out to put those in. So, and I haven't checked the studs yet. A lot of times these studs start to pull a little bit, or they have a big cut in it from the rocker arm over the years, and it kind of wears in the side of them. If I find any, then I'll address that too. The new springs, we may have to work with these spring pockets to set them up right for the new cam. It's not going to get a big aggressive cam, just a little more than what it, just a nice little cam. That's all it really needs. Because I'm going to I'll probably go ahead and put a few pistons in, see what the deck height is. I didn't do that when we tore it down. We kind of tore it down, not really in a hurry, but we did kind of tear it down fast. So I didn't check to see how high the piston actually came to the deck and stuff. So I'll probably do that and then maybe just zero deck it or get it within 5 thou and see these heads and see if they're matched. After we do all machining, CC them, get them all matched, figure out our compression ratio, and if we need a little more, then I'll surface the heads. I think the heads were surfaced, but they just have that color to them because they've been sitting. But I'll double check. I will double check that. But anyway, so there's that. I don't know how well the video's coming out. I moved around so much, but basically a stock rebuild. What this was, and like I say, just a few little things that I would do different, and so that's what we're gonna do. So anyway, you guys stay safe out there. All right, have a good one.